guys, are you looking to get an awesome PSAT score, maybe a 1450 plus? Maybe you want to qualify for National Merit Finalist status or semifinalist status, or just be a commended student of some sort? If so, in this video, I'm going to talk to you guys about how to max out your PSAT score. My name is Brooke. I've coached students to perfect PSAT scores, I've coached students to perfect SAT scores, and I'm going to share with you some of my tips in this video. You can also check out SupertutorTV.com, where we've got online courses for both the SAT and the ACT. We've also got a couple of math books for the ACT on Amazon.com, so be sure to check those out. And of course, subscribe to our mailing list because we'll keep you in the know of all the awesome things we're doing here on YouTube, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find us on social. As always, we have a blog that goes with this video. In that blog, I'm going to also have some resources for you guys, so be sure to check that out. The link's in the description. So first tip, if you want to get an awesome score on the PSAT, is you want to practice with Real PSATs. The College Board has released a couple of PSATs that are really easy to find. We've got a couple listed that we link out to on our resources page. You can head to supertutortv.com/resources and click on the links to download a couple of PSATs. Those are the ones that are officially released by the College Board. But there are also more released PSATs on the market because the PSAT, above all, is a learning experience for most of the students taking it. In terms of finding those PSATs, you of course can get them from older brothers or sisters or something like that. But there's also a community of people on the internet, on Reddit, and probably on other places, who have accumulated many photocopies of these tests. I don't vouch for the legality of everything that's going on there, and I do not advocate breaking copyright law, but I am telling you that there are discussions of people who are sharing information about fully released PSATs that have been released by the College Board, put out into the world. And the more real PSATs you can take and you can do, the better prepared you're going to be for this test. And the PSAT is slightly different from the SAT. And so that's why I really like, on a test level, practicing with PSATs to identify what am I missing, so then you can go back and target those areas that you miss. If you're targeting from PSATs as opposed to SATs, you are going to be a little bit more honed in on the way that the test is slightly different from the SAT. And most of the difference when it comes to content comes into the math section because they're not expecting you to have finished pre-calculus. So the pre-calculus items that show up on the SAT generally do not show up on the PSAT so often. And that's the biggest difference. The PSAT tends to really drive home algebra. The timing is also slightly different from the SAT. The reading section is 47 versus 52 questions. The math no calculator section is 17 versus 20 questions. The math calculator section is 31 versus 38 questions. And yes, you have a little bit less time on the PSAT. You have 5 fewer minutes on the reading. You have 10 fewer minutes on the math calculator. But on the math no calculator, you have fewer questions and just as many minutes. So there's a little bit more breathing space per question in terms of pacing and timing on the PSAT, which is kind of nice. But in any case, it's really similar to the SAT. So if you can cream the SAT, you're going to be fine on the PSAT. So after you take a real PSAT, one of the things that's really important is that you go over what you miss. I have a present for you guys, which is complete explanations to every question on PSAT 1. And you guys can check that out by going to supertutortv.com/PSAT1. And I have video explanations for every single question in the practice test PSAT 1. So definitely check that out. If you like what you see there, that's a piece of what we have in our online course. I have lots more explanations in our online course. If you learn well in that way, definitely go check that out. When you go over those questions with me, I'm going to tell you what kind of thing you're missing or what kind of rule is at play. And I want you to make a list of all the things that you need to go over, and then you need to drill down all of those things. And like I said, because it's so similar to the SAT, when you get to that review stage, you can study like you're studying for the SAT. So that brings me to our next point, which is number 2, study like you're studying for the SAT. And that means you probably want to get some books. I recommend books from independent tutors, and I recommend getting topic books. So I don't recommend getting like one big book that's like, you know, so-and-so's brand guide to the SAT, and then it has like a chapter on math, a chapter on reading. I recommend getting a standalone book for reading, a standalone book for writing and language, and a standalone book for math, especially writing and language and math. Sometimes reading you can do just off like tips from our YouTube channel and things like that, because it's much more of a using real practice materials kind of help as opposed to just using a workbook or something like that. Reading, I say, is usually best learned by practicing with real reading sections and then having strategies. So whether you need a reading book or not, you know, that's up for grabs. If you have a lot of time before your PSAT, I would recommend you start with one of our videos like how to self-study for the SAT, which is going to give you an overview of how to overall prep for this exam. If you don't have a lot of time and you're like, Brooke, I'm really close, I need 30 points, 50 points, then I would recommend you check out our video, which is tips for high scorers, also an SAT video, but that's going to help you with that last 50 points and talk to you about issues that come up primarily in my students who are very high scorers. Okay, so those are kind of two videos that I have. But like I said, any prep materials you would be using for the regular SAT, you can also use for the PSAT. Okay, my next tip is that you want to master your basic strategies for every section of the test. You're already probably a good student. You probably get good grades in school. How do you translate that to the SAT? Well, you have to learn the test itself. And these basic strategies that I'm going to go over right now are really important so that you can position yourself to understand the test and not just understand the general knowledge the test is supposedly testing. Reading, a few tips. One, my overall tip on the reading section is always zoom out. On the reading section, when you feel like you can't see the answer, a lot of times the best thing to do is kind of take a step back and think about things more holistically. Think about those answer choices holistically. Think about the passage holistically. What makes sense? And stop getting so caught up in details matching or detail. Sometimes loosening up a little bit, zooming out a little bit can be a really awesome tip. This is a vibey test, as I like to say. It's an emotional test. Not everything is just like tick-tock specific little logic, right? A lot of times it's the feeling, it's the vibe, it's the overall sense. And if you zoom out a little bit, you're going to get that. A few other go-to tips that I have in the reading are come up with your perfect answer first. That means don't look immediately down at the answer choices. I go over that in plenty of my videos. Do not infer. This is the idea that you really want to hug the passage. You want to listen to the passage really closely. A big mistake that a lot of people make is you might see a word like watch. You might see a scene where she checks her watch. You might think, oh, she checks her watch probably because she's running late. Do you see how I just inferred that? That was a total inference. You do not want to infer on the PSAT. You want to look at the passage and those words in context and see how are those words functioning in that context. What is the meaning from that? And you want to get that meaning before you look down at the answer choices. That's really big time goal. Not inferring is huge, especially for a lot of students. Next up is writing and language. You guys need to have grammar locked up boot to bonnet. That means you need to know how to use colons, commas, semicolons. You need to know what a run-on sentence is. You need to know how to avoid it. You need to know how to check verb tense. You also need to know what idiomatic usage is and how to make sure that you are making the right choice. You need to know what redundancy is and how to avoid it, all that good kind of stuff. And then you also need to know the rhetorical strategies, right? Placement questions, transition questions, diction questions. Those tend to be the last sort of bars that you have to hurdle over. So you want to work on those as well. Again, you can get a book from an independent tutor. Our online course also has material that goes over these topics. And finally, my tip on the reading that was zoom out is also my tip on the writing section. The number one thing you can do once you're down to like -4 or -6 is zoom out. Whenever you get to a question, you're not quite sure what the answer is, zoom out, zoom out. Think about the context. Read it like a reading comprehension passage. That's what's going to save you above all, is reading more, expanding your viewpoint. Stop being so concerned with this little tiny place where you are and start thinking about everything else in the passage that informs it. When you think bigger, that really helps in the writing and language. So there's my tip if you're looking to get to that elusive perfect. Math, quick tips for math. You want to be familiar with everything. So how is the best way to do that? Well, I have a cheat sheet for you, and you can find it on our blog that goes with this video. And that will have all of the equations, all of the kind of fun facts of math that show up on this test. It's a really fast, easy way to, in a handful of pages, get an overview of all the kinds of math that you're going to need on the PSAT. Now, I'm going to warn you, that's an SAT cheat sheet. Again, like I said, content is the one area the PSAT is different. So I'm going to talk to you right now about what you want to focus on when you focus on those math areas. Algebra is number 1 when it comes to the PSAT. Again, because there's less trig, maybe even a little less geometry, you really want to make sure you know your upper level algebra. They're going to expect you to have algebra 2. So make sure you know your polynomials, make sure you know your exponential growth equation, quadratics, y = mx + b, slope kind of questions, systems of equations. Those kind of things are the bread and butter. You really want to make sure you master all those types of questions, and that's going to get you in good spirit. The second number 1 kind of thing is percents and ratios and rates, okay? So percents, ratios, and rates and algebra are what I want you to focus on the most when you're looking at that cheat sheet. You generally don't need to worry about anything that's like unit circle or trig that much. And the geometry sometimes comes up, but it's much less prevalent on the PSAT than the SAT. The SAT tends to do a little bit more of that. You also want to look out for the kind of curveballs that the SAT likes to pull on this test that sometimes get my students because they don't see it coming. One of those areas is data collection and conclusions, and you can find that on Khan Academy. You can also find it on our online course or in a book. But make sure that you know things like data collection and conclusions, table data, that kind of stuff. Really focus on that kind of data stuff because that's usually where students really feel a curveball coming in because it's just not similar to what you do in math class. Those are my tips for you guys to rock your PSAT. I hope it goes really well. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. And again, check out the blog that goes with this video. You can download our cheat sheet there, and you can check out our website and all the other blogs that we have there if you want more study tips. Thanks you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.